Hello, and welcome to the depths of hell, Chapter 16 of my TearRing Saga Champions of Utena low turn count playthrough. According to the story, in this chapter, we are heading north into the Mermal Caves in order to deal with the monsters besetting the Salian army from the north, before Holmes heads north into the Leda Valley after his current goal. In terms of gameplay though, this map is absolutely infamous among everyone who's played this game, because it's incredibly frustrating in many ways, and pretty much all of these frustrations carry over into an LTC context. When I said this was the worst map in all of Fire Emblem, I really meant it. In fact, this map is so frustrating that this is the first chapter in the game where I decide to save after finishing my preparations, so that I don't have to redo the preparations every single time I'm forced to reset within the first 3 turns, because that would have wasted a whole lot more of my real time, and I don't have time for all that. Speaking of preparations, these are quite extensive so that we have all the tools we need to make this map as easy as it can possibly get. Naron absolutely needs to be promoted by the end of this chapter, so he gets his Knight Crest. Mel is going to be taking the save staff here, because by hell we are going to need that thing, and Katri is going to be unavailable on account of rampaging around as a giant dragon for a large part of this map. Vega grabs a Levin sword, because having a 2-range option for him on this map is really helpful, and the enemies are so weak that his low attack with it doesn't matter much. Junie needs to grab out a wide range of swords, because she's going to be seeing a lot of combat on this map, and what she needs for each context tends to vary significantly. Merchen, on the other hand, is just getting one sword, Krishna's main Ghosh, which is going to help him stay alive as he treks across the swamp in the middle of this map. Since I'm deploying all of these lock-touch units, you might have already guessed what the objective of this map is. It is to open all of the treasure chests. Thankfully, however, we do not need to rout the enemy on this map, which is a really nice thing, because figuring out how to kill all of these annoying moguls, in addition to getting to the treasure chests in time, would have been a real pain. Junie is being empowered at the start of this chapter, and that allows her to one-hit KO all of the starting moguls on this map with the steel sword, and she is going to need to do that on the first turn in order to avoid being blocked off by 2 moguls who get close to her. Movement order is particularly important in this first turn, because firstly, we can't have any of our combat units within 3 spaces of Merchen while they're fighting, for reasons that I will get into shortly. So Vega has to move before Merchen does, and then Merchen has to move away so that Holmes can also engage in combat. Before Holmes moves, we also move in Katri so that she can provide support to Holmes and maximize his accuracy, in conjunction with Vega having Lan's Mirror for another +5 hit. Holmes proceeds to attack a mogul through the wall, and that's going to be very important in the long run, because that means that that mogul isn't going to cause any problems for us once we get to the chest nearby it. Unlike in our last open treasure chests map, the treasure in this chapter is spread far and wide in all corners of this very large map, and that's why we need to deploy all 3 of our lock-touch units. Our combat units are going to be focusing on screening their paths ahead of them and doing their best to make sure that no moguls get in the way. Once again, that's kind of tricky for the units escorting Merchen because of his trait that we're going to talk about soon. Over the course of this chapter, we are going to need to refresh 4 units, including all 3 of our lock-touch units, in order to minimize the turns that we take. The thing about the enemies on this map that makes them a pain is that they are all capable of summoning more enemies to clog up space. And in particular, the boss, who's an Arch-Mogul, is capable of summoning 4 high-level Moguls in a single go. If the boss does this on turn 1 enemy phase, that is just straight up a reset, because there is no good way to deal with all of that. On this upcoming enemy phase, there is often a situation where Junie has to fight a divided Mogul, and she's perfectly capable of killing it off with any of her possible weapons, because after division, Mogul HP is quite low. Unfortunately, because of movement constraints, Junie is forced to be within 3 range of Merchen here, and so his skill, which is called Mug, means that she's incredibly inaccurate here. What Mug does is lowers the hit of allies within 3 spaces by a whopping 50. So, as you can imagine, Junie's accuracy against the Moguls on this turn is extremely poor. Because of that, we also made sure that she is in range of Vega with Land's Mirror, and on this turn, if I had to have her in combat, I would have had her equip the most accurate sword that she can possibly use, which is the Estoc that she has in her inventory right now. On this player phase, we need to refresh Vega, but unfortunately Plum does not have the movement to reach him to do so, so instead we are going to have her dance Lyria over and do our first sing rig of the entire game. Any time that I need sing to go off, I am going to be using a save staff beforehand, and in that way you can think of the save staff as being used in a manner kind of like the Anu staff from New Mystery of the Emblem, which is a ranged refresh staff. Keep in mind though that I will also make use of any random sing procs that occur if they could be useful to me. So now I'll go into detail on Sing's effect. The basic effect of Sing is to be an area of effect heal. It's not very much, but there are no area of effect healing staves like Fortify in this game, so Sing is the only means of healing multiple units in a single action in the entire game. The range of this healing starts out low at only 1, thus only affecting adjacent units. But as Lyria gains levels, it increases every 5 levels she gains, up to a maximum of 4. And every target of her healing can also be affected by the random refresh rate that she has. And that means that Lyria is essentially a ranged dancer who relies on RNG. And that is going to be very powerful during this run. Thanks to that refresh, Vega is able to get ahead of Junie on this turn, which makes it much less likely that she gets blocked off by Moguls and is unable to move where she needs to on the next turn. Sing's basic refresh rate is 10%, although while I was recording this, I began to doubt that that number was its true value, and I thought it was actually under the same RNG effects as hit and critical rates, as I mentioned back in Chapter 2. This is because it took me 67 attempts to get this Sing refresh to go off, and that's only the ones after I started counting out of sheer frustration. But I checked in with Laponia after finishing the run, and he said that it is in fact a true 10% refresh rate, so I just got really unlucky with that as I was recording this. Anyway, Sing also has a counter to it that keeps track of the number of times you use it. And as you use Sing, the amount of healing gradually goes up from basically nothing to still basically nothing but slightly better. But importantly, the refresh chance also increases as you use it. Every 50 times you Sing, you get an extra plus 2% to the refresh rate. And because of that, I'm going to be using it as much as I possibly can in an attempt to reach 50 uses before I have to start using it without the help of the save staff. Vega is now in a position to attack the boss, and because of the property of Shram that I didn't mention earlier, he is ideally suited to doing so. In addition to halving incoming damage, Shram is also effective against monsters, which means Vega easily one-round KOs this boss even without the critical hit that he just got. Unfortunately, the boss has an Azoth, like the boss of Chapter 5 did, and this time we are actually forced to kill the boss again after he resurrects with the Azoth, in order to get him off the tile that he's on, where there is a treasure chest. This Azoth is why it was so important for Vega to get in front of Junie, because otherwise he just doesn't have the time to get 2 one-round KOs in. Moogle Boss's Singless run had Lionel come across in order to get a low % critical hit to kill the boss the second time. Honestly though, I don't see the difference between rigging a 10% Sing proc and rigging a low % critical hit for a kill that you need. Martel has just demonstrated an interesting property of this map by mounting up on top of the swamp. The swamp and woods tiles in this map actually count as outdoor tiles for the purposes of mounting, allowing Martel to fly straight across them with ease. Swamp tiles also deal damage each turn, normally, but because of the secondary effect of the Frontiersman's skill, none of my relevant units are going to take any of that damage. Come to think of it, avoiding this out of combat damage is probably the reason why the Guardian Dragons were given Frontiersmen in the first place. Now, Martel may get to take a shortcut across the swamp, but Plum still needs to dance Merhen during this chapter, and she is not capable of flying across the swamp. So instead, she is going to trek all the way around the side of the swamp in order to meet up with Merhen on the other side after he gets the treasure chest in the swamp. Vega has now killed the boss for the second time, freeing up that tile and preventing any strong moguls from being spawned in. During my testing runs, I did actually encounter a situation where the boss refused to attack on this enemy phase, which meant that I had to have Vega finish him off on player phase, and that meant that he was unable to get ahead of Junie like he needed to clear the way to the upper left chest. It's important that Vega stays ahead of Junie here in order to give the moguls as many chances as possible to attack into him and to die, instead of dividing and making more obstacles for them to go through. One of the moguls jumped onto the treasure chest in this clear as well, replacing the boss, so Vega is only barely going to be ahead of Junie, thanks to his use of the Levin sword to clear the treasure chest tile off again. So you probably think that this behavior is odd, so we're going to have a big discussion of the moguls now. Firstly, moguls are pretty fast, but not very accurate. So they have decent avoid, which makes them tricky to kill sometimes, but it's not likely that they're going to be hitting enough to kill anybody in turn. Another quirk is that they, like yellow units, always play map animations, so the only combat animations we see on this map were with the boss. The really frustrating part about moguls, though, is their AI. Moguls basically have 3 options in their AI, and it is pretty much completely random which ones they pick. They can either move, or divide in order to make more moguls, or they can stay still and not take any actions at all. The mechanics of mogul division in this game are slightly different to Fire Emblem Gaiden. When a mogul divides in this game, its HP pool is split between itself and the new mogul, and that means that moguls that have been dividing for a bit have really low HP and are very easy to kill, as long as you can get them to attack you. And that's the problem. Moguls are not guaranteed to attack, even if there is a unit of yours in their range. As far as I'm aware, there is simply no way around this random AI factor. This means that if a mogul gets the chance to divide itself a whole lot, you will end up with a bunch of 1 HP moguls that all have this chance to just refuse to attack you and instead stand right where you need to go on the next player phase. That's why Holmes killed the mogul on turn 1, and that's why Vega needs to stay ahead of Junie so that he can have as many chances for the Moguls to attack him as possible. And it's also why I'm sending both Naron and Martel all the way around ahead of Merhen in order to deal with the Moguls in the upper right before Merhen has a chance to get body blocked by them. Holmes is actually having some issues with survival here. He's being mobbed a bit by a Mogul, which can actually double him, so he needs to whip a fruit out of the convoy in order to avoid the risk of death here. Because the Moguls that started near the forest have divided quite a lot over these first few turns, Vega and Junie both need to make sure to kill at least one Mogul on every player phase as they go, so that there's less chance of them getting blocked off by division or random pacifism. Now, Naron is being followed around by Plum, who's mostly dancing him, but I did have her enarmor him on the last turn, because he is doubled by the Moguls, and his accuracy against them really isn't the best. So having the extra buffer of the damage reduction there is nice for when he needs to see combat against the Moguls. After using the Fierce Breath quite a lot, I finally remember that Neuron has a far more accurate single target breath, and make use of that in order to keep the Moguls away from Lyria and Mel, who need that protection. There were times during this clear where I could have killed a Mogul, but didn't because I completely forgot that I had a single target breath that wasn't going to accidentally kill Merhen. Now, I've explained why I've started recording the number of songs in the descriptions of these videos, but you've probably noticed I've also been doing it for dance. And that's because dance also has a counter that keeps track of the number of dances you do. If you dance enough, the skill starts applying Empower, Ensorcel, or Enarmor buffs when you use it. But it's not going to happen in this run, because it doesn't start happening until you hit 150 dances. So the count is more or less academic for this run, but it's quite useful in a more casual run, or a displayed turns LTC, where you can grind out the dances in skirmishes without increasing your turn count. Okay, I've gone over Merhen's mug, but did you know that his stats are also complete garbage? The reason that I gave Merhen the main gauche at the start of this map is that he has to face a whole lot of Moguls in combat over the course of it, and his stats are just not going to let him hold up against that without the bonus of Void. On the flip side though, the main gauche's hit is truly atrocious, so Merhen struggles to get kills even against very weak enemy Moguls. He does his best, bless him, but Merhen really is complete garbage. Now, as you can see in the upper left corner, the Moguls there are doing their best to fill up that entire room and make my life as difficult as they possibly can. Vega is my only combat unit in this area, and he is going to have to put in a lot of work, fighting not just the Moguls, but also RNG in the form of their stupid AI. This area is touch and go, and really demonstrates why I hate doing this map with a passion. On the other hand, Merhen is now past the enemies that were hounding him, and Neuron is able to finish off the last two Moguls and clear out the swamp area, thanks to her Fierce Breath being able to hit both of them at once. The only obstacle for Merhen now is the large number of Moguls that are clumping up in the upper right area. But because I have two combat units in this area, in Martel and Naron, this isn't going to be as big of a problem as Vega is having to deal with. Speaking of Merhen once again, I forgot to mention the trade-off of Mug, which is that anyone killed by the unit with Mug gets all of their items taken, which is one way to get a lot of items off enemies that you might not normally be able to get. However, it's really not worth the downsides in general, and Merhen can barely kill anything in the first place. We are now going to see Naron's promotion bonuses in action, at long last. He promotes into Gold Paladin here and receives ridiculous boosts to his HP, Strength, Skill, Speed, Defense, and Mastery. In addition, he picks up Adept and Pavis as class skills, which will also help him out. You saw before that his hit rate against these moguls was pretty low, in the high 60s, but now that he's promoted, that's going to go through the roof, and he's going to be much more reliable than he was before. With Naron promoted, all of our experience goals have been met, so it's going to be a lot more relaxing in that front from here on. Now, after all that talk of screening my lock touch users' routes with my combat units, you may have noticed that Holmes didn't actually have one of those helping him out. He had to just walk on his own. Holmes is a tricky unit to use in this map because he is locked to 2 range, so he cannot counterattack any of the moguls to kill them. Because of that, he is entirely unsuitable for heading for the upper left or upper right treasure chests. Luckily for us, his path to the lower treasure chest is actually more lenient than either of the others. He has 3 tiles of leeway to get there in time. And that means that even if a mogul gets in front of him, he is perfectly capable of losing 2 tiles to go up and around them, or even cutting through a forest tile if necessary. And that's why Holmes is sent to this specific treasure chest. If he does manage to get penned in by 2 moguls, then that is a reset, and that's unfortunately common when the Archmogul starts summoning, which is why a turn 1 Archmogul summon is a hard reset. But most of the time, this is the most reliable path for Holmes to take. Now, the enemy phase configuration of the enemies in the upper left area looks incredibly bad. I was seriously worried that this one wasn't going to work out, but I used the save staff for a second time on turn 6 in order to give me a way to preempt any bad RNG in the last 3 turns. The way these enemies have moved means that I can't get Vega as close to the treasure chest as I would like, which means there are far more possible tiles for the moguls to stand on to block my way. And obviously at most one of them can still be between Junie and the chest on the next player phase. Martel just picked up a defense point from leveling up, and if you're eagle-eyed, you may have noticed that this is the second time she has reached 6 defense on this map. This is because she dismounted. I had to go back and double check to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me when I first saw it. Martel's combat in this last stretch is helped by the fact that right at the start of this chapter, I had Mel ensorcel her for +7 magic. This is not enough for Martel to one-hit KO full health level 1 moguls with the Levin sword, but it is enough for her to kill them if they've only divided once, which is quite likely here. And that allows her to have some versatility in dealing with these last few moguls between us and our goal. On this turn, you'll see that Merchen gets danced, but then he proceeds to not move. And that is because, obviously, we don't want his mug skill interfering with Naron or Martel's combat on this enemy phase. Instead, we are going to dance him again on the next turn, and get the double move to finish the map that way. This enemy phase was a real nail-biter for me, but it actually ended up going surprisingly well, because a really large number of the moguls decided that attacking Vega or Junie was actually cool this turn. I guess that's somewhat made up for by my bad luck on the other side of the map, where Naron ended up unable to use his newly boosted hit rates against the mogul next to him because it decided not to attack him at all, and luckily only one of the other moguls also decided to get in the way. As mentioned, Vega's action is sufficient to deal with 1 mogul in the way on the left, and we have 2 actions with which to deal with 2 moguls in the way on the right hand side. At the start of this turn, I double check Mergen's range, because he does need his full movement twice in a row in order to reach the treasure chest. And because of where my units are, Martel is not able to 2-range with the Levin sword to finish off the Mogul next to Naron. Instead we have to rely on him to kill it, and then have Martel defeat the second Mogul. And at this point, with victory so close and all of the RNG having gone in my favor, I was feeling very, very anxious, and I was trying to be very, very careful with my inputs, because in both sides of the map, I could have accidentally input an attack on a Mogul instead of opening the chest, or Vega could have accidentally attacked the wrong Mogul. So I was very nervous, and I'm very grateful that I didn't make any input mistakes. In his combat on this player phase, Vega gains the final level that he needs to learn the Draco skill. Draco is a proc skill that causes the attack to deal triple damage, kind of like a regular Fire Emblem critical hit, although it can only activate at 1 range. Now, we've picked up quite a few very handy items during this map, including a couple of promotion items, as well as the hammer and staff from under the boss. And Holmes is going to pick up the first Chukonu that we get, in order to finish off the chapter in 9 turns. Despite what you may think, I'm a casual player at heart, and the idea of finishing this chapter in 9 turns still seems unreal to me sometimes. Anyway, as this map comes to a close, so too does Holmes' story for now, as we move back to Runan on the world map. That's all for this video, and I will see you next time as Runan begins his march against the Empire's forces.